Hey, welcome back, Mere Mortals. This is the Mere Mortal podcast where we're striving for excellence through life lessons. Today we're going to be talking about nihilism, whatever you want to call it. I don't know how to pronounce it. We went for a bit of a look around today just to see how it's pronounced. I've seen it being pronounced different ways by different people.
So it sort of seems like
nihilism.
Whatever suits you best, whatever way you want to say it.
Now, this might be
prefer nihilism.
Yeah. Now, and this might be a word as well that people might not have encountered before. They might have heard us talk about it in the past obscure, as well. So it's an obscure term. Once we get into it, I think we'll probably debunk and define what it means and the definition behind it. I want to be talking about the different types of nihilism.
Yep.
I guess some of the background about it as well, and nihilism versus existentialism.
Yeah, I got a little bit of the history of it, maybe some references to pop culture, and yeah, I think that'll carry us through. Everything.
Good. All right, but before that, of course, there's going to be the mere mortal moment. I'm going to kick it off. When there is no enemy within, no external enemy can harm us. Okay. So I'll start with a little old quote. This is a very, very old quote from, I don't know, probably thousands of years old. The whole takeaway from it, though, is how often mere mortals can get harmed by the internal enemies as opposed to the external enemies.
Yeah.
Or just how much external actions can affect you. Definitely, they can. But we're just so much often, it's the internal actions that we take, we think about, that harm us even more.
Yeah, I'd agree that like 99% of my problems are caused by me thinking myself into it rather than,
like imagine if there was like all of the issues that you actually had to encounter was purely the external ones. It wasn't anything internal.
God, that would be horrendous. Like you'd just be barraged day in, day out.
Yeah,
but it's not like that. It's
wouldn't be
more
fun.
like, once a quarter, someone will do something that annoys you.
Really gets you going. Yep.
All right, mine is, some concepts are so tightly linked that arguing the opposite is the height of foolishness. So, cookies, to argue that they're not tasty is the height of foolishness. Walking, to argue that it is harmful is the height of foolishness. Nihilism, to argue that it doesn't lead to despair, I think is the height of foolishness. But we'll dive into that a little bit as we get to it. But I think there are some things which is like, there's some concepts which just one leads to the other so directly that, like communism. Say what you will, but all the countries that have tried it have ended up as shitholes.
That's true.
Like, just don't argue it. Don't argue it.
But it's interesting because there has to the argument comes from somewhere. Like there is, as much as you want to say, there is instances where people can say, "Oh, but they can be like walking can be bad for you." There are possibilities. It's not an absolute always perfect.
No, I would argue you're foolish if you argue that. If you're legit trying to argue that.
What if? Okay, yeah, but I think it's obscure to say no. It never is an issue. So imagine if you walked 100 days straight.
I'm not saying it's never an issue. I'm just saying it's foolish if you're arguing that it.
Yeah, I agree with that too. Because I think that comes with communism. The problem is when you talk through the philosophy of it, or maybe the idea behind it, you can get led down the garden path of, oh, this could work well in theory, and in a very particular theory by a certain subset of view. But it's foolishness to compare it to the reality of life.
I could jump from this bridge and it could work. Well, yeah, it could, but it doesn't. So whatever. Anyway, getting sidetracked. Definition.
Okay, definition of nihilism.
Life is meaningless. Human values are baseless. Knowledge is impossible. Nothing really exists. These are all things that you can hear if you type in nihilism or nihilism and look it up. And they all sort of touch, I guess, you mentioned that there's different types. And so I think a lot of these touch on the different types, but it's essentially that concept that, nothing really matters. There's no grounding, and you can put a more scientific spin on it. You can put a more existential, you can put a more political, whatever it is. But it's arguing, I guess there's like nothing at the base. That's sort of what I got from it. Basically,
yeah. I mean, the typical definition I was finding was it was rejection of religious and moral principles, and Friedrich Nietzsche saying that what does it mean? It means that the highest values devalue themselves. So it's the aim of lacking the why. So it's when there is really no backing to it at all. And I was talking about the different types, and the more I sort of went and searched down the path of it, you're talking about cosmic, the actual moral, political, but I think when most people hear the word nihilism, it's much more like existentialism, existential nihilism, where it's just pretty much you just don't, no care for anything. In totality.
The deepest
the
one.
deeper one. Yeah. So, do you have a bit of a root of the word or anything behind that as well?
No. I'm sure there is something interesting from it.
Well, I actually did find it.
Annihilate as well. I think it might have something to do with that. But
No. The root of the word nihilism is derived from the Latin of nihil, which means nothing.
Nothing. Actually, I do remember that.
So, and it's more of a series of related positions and problems in a single school of thought. So it's more, I think it's not just one school of thought. I think there's like various schools of thoughts about all the different ones, but as a whole, they make up the idea of, there's a lacking of a why behind all of it.
Yeah. So, well, while we're on this topic, I'll give a little bit of the history of it. So it was, first I think came up within the early 1800s, like the actual word was first used in the early 1800s. And, but it was sort of in like just this random book. No one gave a shit about it. And then there was a very popular book called Fathers and Sons, published in 1862 by Ivan Turgenev. Turgenev.
It almost made me think, I was like, is that the book you read? But it wasn't. You read Sons and Daughters, not Fathers and Sons.
I read Sons and Lovers.
Sons and Lovers, that's the one.
Anywho, this is Russian, of course. Like, where's nihilism come from? The bloody Russians. Bloody Russians. And so then that was when it sort of like got introduced into the mainstay. But once again, it was like, words change meaning so differently. So back then it wasn't really the existential one. It was more, I think it was more like a political one with people getting nihilistic about the order, like the social order that there was in Russia in that day. And then it wasn't until like Nietzsche came along and started talking about, like you mentioned, the highest values devaluing themselves. So this was sort of him looking at the like the Anglo-Christian sort of predominance in the 1800s coming into the 1900s and saying like, as the result of, the scientific method and whatnot, it's all these things are going to like undercut themselves. And what he means by that, I was really intrigued by the highest values devaluing themselves. And so what he was saying, it's like, justice is always fair, something like that. But you can find instances when there are unjust things. A little kid gets cancer. There's nothing more unjust than that. And so he was saying these highest values of like science and Christianism and whatnot, they'll undercut themselves and take away their own base. And then that was the whole thing of where he was trying to create the Übermensch, the Superman. Which is fascinating, man. I want to read Nietzsche more. Like it's been on my to read list, but I also want to read it in German. So it's like, I sort of feel like I should wait, but I don't want to wait, 2 years until
2 years before you start reading it.
Start reading it. So I don't know.
One of the things I encountered, obviously looking into nihilism, was, people were saying, how much Nietzsche is a nihilist, I guess, in the sense of what he was talking about. But the more I both read of Nietzsche and also was looking into it, it wasn't that he was at all. He was actually looking at it in the sense of, he's not a nihilist. He's actually talking about how it's bad to be that way, and he's being more of an existentialism. So it's more that's unavoidable. How do you actually front up to it, as opposed to that should just be the default nature of thinking that all is bad. There is no why. The end.
I think he must have felt it of some sort. Like when you're able to describe something so deeply as well as he did, you must feel it in some way. So you have the subjective ability to talk about it. But he didn't come across it, like his whole life after sort of diagnosing it was trying to fix it. And that was the whole Übermensch thing. That was the whole, where he worked himself into like a nervous breakdown. But it was, he's a fascinating dude, man.
Well, and there's a lot of stuff that he pumped out back in the day, and I've actually heard from lawyers in particular. Only tiny little bits.
No, have you read a book?
No, not a book. Okay. Definitely just off videos that I've generally seen some of the Nietzsche stuff. But
same.
A lot of the things that I've seen, and this comes probably from a lot of the psychology, philosophy background, especially if you talk to lawyers, they regard a lot of that stuff as just like crap, like utter crap. Looking at it
like
now,
philosophy.
Like a lot of the stuff that came out from Nietzsche and Jung, I guess, and a couple of others. Have you talked to any recent lawyers about it? There's a lot of.
I think I know any lawyers.
There's a lot of stuff that they bring up and go, that's a lot of that's already been sort of like it's 100 years old. We've already talked through it. There's a lot of different concepts in that. And okay, maybe it's because I'm just misinformed with it, but I still see a lot of the things that they talk about, or a lot of these concepts that still hold through to this day in the way that people can think about it. Maybe there's some perceptions and thoughts about the world that we live in that's changed, but a lot of the, how you start thinking about the world can still lead to those dark, dangerous paths.
Yeah, okay.
Like that hasn't, I don't think, changed.
Yeah. I think it's very intriguing. So I don't know, how many lawyers have you talked to? Like 2, 3?
No, more. I reckon I've heard this from like 20, 30. I'm genuinely serious.
You don't even know bullshit. You don't even
serious?
know
You got to ask lawyers. If there's some lawyers out there listening to this, you need to reply to this because I've heard it too many times.
Okay.
So why do you find nihilism interesting? Because I find it zero interesting. I went through, did a bit of research on it. And I was looking at the concept, the value, looked into existentialism, and I was like, man, this is not interesting at all to me. This was just of no interest.
I'd say it's because one, I've sort of felt it before myself, not super deeply, but enough to know the feeling of it. And then also I think it diagnoses like a lot of problems that people have. Like it's almost like the cause of a lot of problems, or it's to me it's like a winding path that you can sort of get to. You know, have lots of problems, but one of the worst ones is getting deep down into the pits of despair, and that's where I think like nihilism actually is.
Well, see, this is the interesting one. I wanted to ask you this question because I think I'm probably going to have a view that maybe some others will have, in that I looked at this and it was the whole proposition of, okay, well, it's, the lack of meaning basically, or the lack of a why. And I thought, man, I've never had that in my life. I've always had something where even at like the deepest, darkest despair moments, I still had something where I was like, oh, but this is my why. I'm still like, there's a mad focus over here. There's another why here. I'm still finding meaning even in the most horrific, horrible circumstances. I found it. No, I can't imagine that state of mindset of just absolute. Another one that I was looking at, I think it pairs up with the timing, that Russian nihilist movement in the early 19th century, where there was a lot of that teen angst feel, which that probably carried on to today. But the feeling of like, why does anything matter? There's no meaning. Sure. But I just personally haven't felt that at all before. So that's why I was wanting to ask you, do you reckon maybe that's why I don't find it as interesting? And you do? Have you talked to other people about either the meaning of maybe not nihilism in its concept, but the idea of what that entails?
Not particularly. Not in super deep. I mean, like, honestly, man, how often do you have deep conversations like we're doing? Not that often. So not particularly. What is the worst despair you think you've felt though? Like, was it a prolonged period? Was it I
don't know. Yeah, there was a lot of, prolonged periods in terms of, you go months in like certain aspects. So it'd be like in relationships / education / money, where everything just felt horrible. Nothing was working. Everything wasn't firing at all. Everything that you expected wasn't happening or breaking down around you. But even then, there was something else somewhere on that path that I was like, okay, but I'm finding meaning in training.
Have you ever had the feeling of waking up and going, what's the point of even getting out of bed?
No.
Okay.
Like, yeah, so and that's why I'm like, I've never felt that ever before. Even on the days where I wake up and something horrific's happened the day before, people dying, crazy stuff happening, injuries, loss of income, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I've never really woken up the next morning and go, no. But that happens all the time. I've heard this obviously from people that I know of, and obviously that's a thing that occurs in humans. I just haven't sort of experienced that myself, and I don't know, because I would consider myself to be on the other end of whatever nihilism is, the other issue. If that has a word, that's me, on the too much meaning on like everything. Because when I look around, maybe not political, but if I look at like epistemological, cosmic meaning, maybe not so much, but a meaning behind family, training. I feel like I've got meanings on everything, too many things.
Okay.
Where it's almost like that overconsumption, not the lack of a why. Yeah.
Interesting.
So that's why I felt, then that's for me, I thought.
Let's talk about that.
As a mere mortal, I'm like, I'm not interested because I've never experienced it myself. So as someone like you who maybe perhaps got close to experiencing it, or maybe even thought waking up the morning like, well, what's the point of all this? Do you think you can get to being a nihilist quickly? Do you think it would take some time?
That's a good one. I'm not too sure, man. It's I'd say I'm like an optimist now, but I wouldn't have said I was, sort of in, and like you mentioned, like teen angst, that's a little bit different because that is just like pure hormones flooding through and whatnot. And, if you're feeling like true despair when you're above, I'm just going to say 25 years old.
Yeah.
I think that is a little bit different because you've had enough life experience to know a bit more about the world rather than when you're just 18 in school and school seems like life, and then if you look back and it's like school's not life. School's like just a period where they just ship you off for a while until you can like not fuck everything up in the house while your parents are out doing work and whatnot. So getting to a quick, I would say it's more of a gradual process of getting to it because it's pretty rare that I'd say like the full basis of your whatever it is that gives you meaning in life drops out of you. So like I'm just thinking of some examples. Maybe you go into your local parish, you're really in line with the religion or whatnot, and then you find that the pastor has been abusing kids and like other people in the church were hushing it up and whatnot. Okay, that would just like absolutely wreck you. That would probably take you out in terms of where you're finding meaning. So yes, you could, I guess, find that real big drop off, but I would say most people would probably be like a slow, gradual thing if I had to guess.
So I'll give you, let's talk about it this way. So I don't consider myself to be a nihilist, not even close, but I do believe that there's really, like in a broad human perspective, there is no meaning to life. If I look at it as a whole of cosmos, I don't believe there's really a meaning to life. If I look at it as like the comparison of an ant versus a human versus an orangutan versus what used to be the dinosaurs, if you look at it across the broad spectrum of time, the universe that existed, with just another, people are going to call it bacteria, virus, just a gathering of atoms. They obviously are more intelligent. Broadly, what makes us that much special than everything else? Yeah, there's some things, sure. But in the entirety, it doesn't really matter. Like, there's not that. So that's why I felt, okay, the meaning of existentialism, okay, I feel like there's no real meaning, but we can provide meaning to the world around us. That's our own choosing.
Yeah, I'd say, I think you used the word feel there, and I think you might have used it in the wrong way. I'd say you probably feel like there's tons of meaning, but if you sort of use logically, you can work out, okay, there's nothing.
Yeah, I'll say that, yes. So I think my logical sort of thought process will go, no, there's no meaning to absolutely everything.
Yeah, and I sort of have the same, like, when I think about determinism, for example, if there was some way of measuring all the atoms in the universe, would we find out that it's just totally like you can free will your way out of it? Like you can actually do things as a person? Logically, I don't think that like that, but it's sort of like shit. Yeah, it feels like I can decide whether I'm going to pick up this phone now or not. I am going to.
And you do it, yeah.
But yeah, so I think there's a difference between like logically thinking about something and then actually feeling it yourself.
That's true. Yeah. And I think that might be the difference as well between being a nihilist and not. I'd say is if you do feel it as well. So if there's one bit of just, logically thinking it, and then you can, act in different ways. But then when you start feeling it that way too, that's probably the boundary that you cross over into, okay, well, now you're putting it into action, into your emotions and turning it into reality. And it's, okay, that's where it can go.
Yeah.
Obviously, the other person, where did you come across nihilism as well first? So my guess would have to be Jordan Peterson.
Yeah. I'd say that was where the first person I saw really explaining it and what, maybe like how you get to it and how you can sort of get your way out of it. And I sort of felt this was 2017 where it was just, some personal things happening in my life. I'd quit the work. Like I'd done a bunch of things to let myself have more freedom, and it was like almost too much freedom.
Yeah.
I was just in the stage where there were a couple of days where it was like, fuck, what's the point of getting out of bed? Like, all right, I'll go do it. But yeah, it was just that sluggishness inside of me, which is different. I'd say it's different than a depression as well. I think there's like slight flavors on these things. I should do some research and see if there is Because like you were saying, you might have felt despair at different points of your life.
Well, and
maybe
that's
like acute one.
Yeah, see, this is
not the deep
this
one.
is where I struggle with nihilism and people who say like, I'm a nihilist. So are you a nihilist or are you depressed? That there's a difference there. Because to be depressed is sometimes can be acute, it can be longer. But nihilism is more, it's more the mindset or like a broad base basis on like, oh yeah, this is my thinking process behind it all, and that's why I've arrived at that. But if you're depressed, it's generally now it's derived of actions or things happening, but it is large in part emotionally, right? You emotionally in that state for whatever that has happened. That's how you arrive there, because you can get yourself out by shifting the state of your emotions and the state that you're in. But a true nihilist wouldn't. You just, even if you shift it out, you'd still be like, oh well, that's my thought process and that's where I go. That's what. Yeah.
I think you can be depressed without thinking there's no meaning. So you could say, like I love my family, I love all these things, but you could still just feel as if like
it has no meaning.
Well, maybe not feel like it has no meaning. It's just you just feel really bad. Just feel man, everything sucks. I know these things sort of are good and whatnot. Maybe it's like nihilism, but without the actual logical part of it. So nihilism's maybe where you feel really shit and you can logically think, I feel really shit because there's no meaning. Whereas depression's more just like you just feel it, but you might still be thinking, man, I have a loving wife, daughter, whatnot, but still, oh man, like I just don't want to do anything. Yeah, this sucks. Life, everyone hates me, that sort of stuff.
One of the other things I wanted to talk about was Peterson. So in lead up to this, I was watching a couple of Peterson's videos because I was like, oh, he talks a lot about nihilism. So I want to get his point of view. I understand what he's talking about in terms of the mindset, how you should be wanting to get you out. But one thing that I found interesting is a lot of his videos tended to draw out the nihilists in the community, and all of his comments, like a great majority of the comments on YouTube specifically, were all people like nihilists saying, oh, well, you didn't consider this, or it actually people commenting like, oh, you're drawing out all the nihilists and people like attacking you for X, Y, and Z. So I'll put this question to you. Do you think it's bad to be a nihilist?
Do whatever you want. Do whatever you want is my general feeling. But I think there's a difference as well between someone who says I'm a nihilist. I would say that's not what I've been referring to as the people that I've been mostly referring to when I've been speaking about this. I would say most of this is just average dude who's never even heard of Nietzsche, just going through life, and then for whatever reason you getting into a state of just being like, fuck this, what's the point? Why am I here? What's all this sort of stuff? That's what I've been sort of talking about. For those people who are defending it or arguing against it logically, well, here's one. So I read a couple of things on just blogs, I guess, like talking about it and how it's helped them. So sunny nihilism and its positive potential. And this is what it got me thinking about. Can it be separated from despair? So I guess this is one where it's sort of like what you're asking. Is it bad or can it be good? For me, it's just, I would say it's like a dangerous path to like intentionally take. If you're going down it because for whatever reason you're going down it, it's not something you can really control. But if it's the idea is like, oh yeah, maybe this is a good idea. Maybe this is something that could be useful in my life. I'm not too sure about that. Maybe, but
I just don't think
you have to be a rare person.
And maybe you might prove me wrong here with some of the other blogs, but I just can't find what the usefulness is of being nihilistic in nature. What is the usefulness of finding no meaning and also not doing anything about it?
Well, see, some people say it's that freeing aspect of realizing that maybe someone like you who was having, there's too many meanings, there's too much stuff going on. It matters too much. There's every word that I say sort of matters. We could easily go down that rabbit hole ourselves. We're putting stuff out there onto the internet, potentially affecting people. Maybe I should be thinking really carefully about each word I say. Maybe I should, every time I say someone's a jackass or whatever, maybe I should be doing that. And so if you take the meaning out of life, and this is what this person was arguing, it can be freeing, because then it's like no one cares. It doesn't matter. Like if I stub my toe in public or trip over and people laugh at me, it doesnanic matter. Everything's meaningless in the end. So yeah, sort of. I can sort of see how maybe if you're in that super hypermanic judging yourself sort of state, using that as a way to being, taking that away, the pressure, I guess, of performing or whatnot. I could sort of see that. But then again, you're opening yourself up to then being like, well, what's the point of doing anything?
Yeah.
And so if you can sort of logically think about it but not feel it.
So almost like a selective nihilism, where you're just to some things where you attach no meaning to it, like perhaps you want to be more courageous about talking to people, and you put no meaning in the connections with individuals because it doesn't matter in the end, and so that might free you to go ahead and have that communication. Yeah.
Okay. Sort of like maybe I do with my thinking there's no free will.
Yeah.
So number one, it sort of feels like it is. So I act as if it is, and that allows me to treat people humanely and, not just think they're animals or automatons. That's the word.
Yep.
Robots, and, I just treat them however I want. No. But then if someone cuts me off in traffic, I can switch it on and be like, okay, this person when you get down to it, this person had no choice. They're going to do that pretty much no matter what. So what's the point of you getting angry with it? So it's, selectively pretty useful, because then that stops me getting angry. And it worked the other day. This girl cut me off on the freeway, peep later, going 90 k's an hour. I saw it coming, and thankfully I dropped back and she cut in. Gave her a beep just to be like, hey, don't do that shit. Like, check your blind spots, come on, people. But I was surprisingly calm. Considering how in the past I've reacted. And that was probably one of the worst. That was probably the closest I've come to being in a car accident on the freeway. I think
the more but even when you just talked about it, and I'm just running it through my head, I don't think selective nihilism is a thing. I feel like that's just made up.
Yeah, and that could be true, because that was a nihilism I was using there. That was something completely different. That was something different.
And I think that's where, when people try to debate that, well, nihilism can be a good thing, and I'll give you an example. To me, it just calls bullshit. I'm like, well, that's not nihilism. That's you being maybe acting in a more logical way, acting in different ways. It isn't just because you have an idea that there isn't a meaning to something, doesn't mean that's like your driving factor for absolutely everything. No, you can have other aspects as a normal raw human that you can be utilizing to act on those actions and react to things.
Yeah.
It's not purely being driven by one thought process. I don't believe that is. So it doesn't have to be 100%, but I think if you're going to call yourself a nihilist, it's got to be broadly. And then, we talked about the original 4 different ones, and I think there can be more. You can drive it down into different
Let's
ones.
get into that in a second, because that's interesting.
Yeah. But because even that sort of looking into it, I'm like, oh, well, there's different sectors of nihilism rather than just one big nihilism, if you want to call it. And those mean certain different things. But you can't say, oh, I'm a nihilist when I'm driving. Like, okay, that doesn't really have the meaning that I think people intended to. And this is coming from obviously doesn't really know much about it. So if you want to debate me and can correct me on that, right, sure. But it still doesn't feel to me like that is really the useful nature of the actual word nihilism. I don't think that's like saying, oh, I'm a Christian only when I drive. Like, no, I don't. That doesn't compute to me.
Yeah.
So one thing I actually wanted to ask you before we get into the different types was why Nietzsche. How do you say his name? Nietzsche? No, it's
in German it'd be like Nietzsche.
Well, whatever. Everyone knows Nietzsche. If you don't,
I've definitely
look him up. Oh yeah, and I think his first name's Friedrich.
Friedrich. Yeah, it's like
Friedrich Nietzsche.
Yeah.
Mate. Sorry about that, mate. I know you're dead, but sorry about that. But the reason he was saying a lot of those things around nihilism, and I think he was saying like God is dead, I think it was more his view, and correct me if I'm wrong, around how in Europe people were starting to come off really Christianity in general, and people were kind of losing sight on something to care about. It's like the why was the loss of that Christianity, or God is dead. And so people now having no base to kind of set themselves on like, oh, this is the bigger why or the intent. And now I'm feeling more nihilistic in purpose.
Yeah. I think, and like you were mentioning, just gets back to my mere mortal moment. it's so closely linked to despair and feeling bad that it's sort of, for me, they're just so intertwined, those two things. If you're feeling nihilistic, you're going to be feeling despair. It's not like you can feel nihilistic and then be like, oh, but I'm actually happy.
Yeah. When you say that, and I'm also thinking like Jordan Peterson style, like, talking about therapy, it also makes me think that if someone said to me like, I'm in despair, I'm nihilistic, like I'd want to slap them in the face and be like, no, you're not. You're not nihilistic. You're just in despair. Like, you're not nihilistic. Okay. You can think that you are a nihilist, but being in despair doesn't automatically mean you're a nihilist or you're having that state of mind. I don't think that those are mutual. They don't have to happen both at the same time.
Okay, I'm not so sure about that one, but whatever.
Yeah.
Let's
talk about the four types. Or the types that you found.
I came across 5. Well, actually, I came across a whole lot. But
I came across 4. Well, I'll actually give you this because it might start us off in a good part if I can unlock my actual phone. Because it actually came from one guy in particular that he first talked about. It was Donald Crosby. Don't know if you came across this.
No.
So he actually summed up the 4 types of nihilism in his thought-provoking work on nihilism, The Spectra of the Absurd. It was one of the first books talking about the different types of nihilism. And so the 4 that he came through with was moral nihilism, epistemological nihilism, cosmic nihilism, and then existential nihilism, which is sort of encapsulates everything else really in totality there. Did you come across any other different ones?
Those were the main ones, but I came across political. So the complete destruction of political institutions, which is, it's sort of like almost like anarchism. So anarchists are basically like, we need to tear down the whole system and then rebuild it using a more philosophy of sort of like libertarianism, but a little bit more extreme.
Well, here's an interesting concept for you. So I also had the rejection of the political norms and institution of one state. So I'm going to give you a little story of something that I recently listened to, and you can tell me if he would be considered a political nihilist or not. So the Wolf of Wall Street, you know him? Jordan Belfort?
I know of him.
Yep. So he's got a podcast. You can go check out and have your own thoughts. But he recently put out a podcast, and it was how the US is falling or failing and coming down. It was 36 minutes of him just chatting away. And it was, for all intents and purposes, him talking about how new restrictions were coming because of COVID. And he was just telling people, stop listening. Stop doing what the people are telling you to do, legislations. Go out there. Just go and open restaurants if you're being told you can't. Do it. We're going to have to fight back against this. There's no turning back. We have to not do this anymore. Do you think that would be something like political nihilist, where he's rejecting all the political norms and institution of the day? Or
I don't think
is that just a part of a rejection and you have to go a full rejection of absolutely everything?
Yeah, no, I think he calling for the complete destruction of the
He was called, well,
democracy?
he stopped himself, he stopped himself to say, saying, don't riot, but push back.
No, that's different. That's sort of just like activism.
Okay, and see that's what I want to get to with people, because it's not, I think when I heard nihilism and we're talking about it and listening to it, it seems a little bit like, oh yeah, you could be like, no, that's like that, even that little story, that's not nihilism. You've got to be a complete disregard for democracy in that sort of matter. That would be termed political nihilist.
Yeah, I was going to finish this before. So the political one, it calls for complete destruction, but it doesn't call for any rebuilding or of anything.
Right. Okay.
It's
just rejecting it completely.
Yeah. There's a system. We need to tear it down, and that's it.
Yep.
That's the end. So it's like, okay, what do we do after that?
Just go from there.
What do we do after that? No, there's no what are we doing after that? It doesn't matter. Everything's meaningless.
Yeah, true.
That's sort of the...
See, I've never personally met anybody like that. Well, I've never even listened to anybody like that.
And you're saying like, people calling themselves nihilists. I've never met anyone who would use that term for themselves. And that's why it's sort of, for me, it's more just a unthinking thing that you get to. So if you're like super in despair, you wouldn't go around saying, I'm a nihilist. You would just feel like shit basically all the time. The other one was metaphysical, I came across, which was sort of like, there's no, and this is going to be so hard to explain. There's no concrete objects, only abstract objects. So it's sort of, it's getting into that where it's that sort of philosophy where it's just so hard to conceptualize that it's almost impossible, but it's essentially saying this book doesn't really exist as a physical object in my hands because I can't get all the data. I can't interpret all the data that's actually coming in. So the UV rays, the like the atoms being like the radiation coming from the book, from whatever. Like I can't get all of that. And so this physical thing that I think it actually is doesn't exist. It's something else. That's sort of metaphysical nihilism.
Okay.
Which,
all right.
know, I think it's it can maybe be useful in very abstract arguments where you're going down deep rabbit holes.
Yeah.
But let's not even go there. So
okay. Yep. Okay.
Yeah. But the main ones you said.
Yeah, no, I was just going to talk about the other ones, right? So moral nihilism.
Let me just because I've written them down succinctly,
okay,
so
good.
People can get it. So existential, life is without intrinsic value, meaning, or purpose. Moral, rejection of all normative and ethical views. Already talked about political. Epistemological, no knowledge can or does exist.
Yep.
And those are the basic rules for them.
The other one, and I wanted to if this one's different to metaphysical, the cosmic nihilism, where it's disavows intelligibility
Yeah.
or value in nature, seeing it as indifferent or hostile to fundamental human concerns. So
It sounds like it's a little bit
it's a little bit,
enough that it probably needs its own
so that one, so that one was a little bit of it's indifferent to just the normal like nature to humans, like it's sort of like not even connected at all. Which again, I would almost say that's incorrect in a lot of senses, in the way that we are very much connected to the nature around us or the world around us. Like we're not living in vacuums either. So, and that's where I in the whole concept of it just makes me think, and maybe it's just where my reasoning goes to. I just can't see how any of this is even possible to achieve from a normal human standpoint. Like it makes me think, wow, you must be like a real machine to not feel some sort of meaning somewhere to have a full view of nihilism. Like it escapes my, maybe I'm just not evolved enough to understand, the concept of feeling that way. Because I can definitely understand despair, and I can understand being at your lowest point from rock bottom, but to then have that conceptual, logical mindset that is what it is as well, and that's like there's no going back. I just thought, okay, it's a bit of a stretch too far for me.
Yeah,
but I'm hoping we get like 1,000 comments from nihilists on this, especially on YouTube, because obviously you can't comment on the podcast, but on the video, I'll welcome people commenting on it.
All right, well, you, my friend,
we're opening ourselves up to some commenting.
Well, you are.
I am.
I've
Karen's treading the line in the middle ground.
Well, there's a couple of book reviews I've done, and I'm starting to get some very long comments in return, and it's not a great way to have a convo.
That's true.
It's really bad way to have a conversation with someone.
But look, I will stand. I hold strong opinions, but they are loosely held. So if you can sway me, I'm happy to be swayed. But I just need there's going to have to be some overwhelming proof here.
Okay.
For it.
Yeah. All right. That sounds good. Man. Geez, what you said something that reminded me. I'll go with this one. Where do you think people are most despair? That's what I wanted to talk about. I would say probably you haven't, and I've maybe a little bit further down the path, but still haven't really felt the full, despair, as in, the despair of, like I was saying, like losing your whole religion or losing something that's so deeply held, such a deeply held belief that it's gone. Like neither of us has. So when we're talking about this topic, it's sort of like, a little bit secondhand, trying to
that's true.
See it through the sort of foggy glass. Whereas there's probably people out there who have really gone down to the deep depths of hell almost.
One of the places that I would have, if it was to occur, happened a lot would be, say, a post World War II, Nazi camps style, where people would come out of that in absolute despair, or even like during it. Either during it, a little bit afterwards, you come out and you find out all your family's been killed. You're basically the only one left. All your possessions are destroyed. There's nothing else. In those circumstances, that's where I would have expected to maybe read a lot about it or find out a lot about it. But even then, I don't see it too much. I don't know if you've encountered it in any of your readings or anything like that.
Well, this is what Jordan Peterson gets at. He's essentially saying, okay, yes, you can get to the state where you're thinking it, but you still have to take actions in the world. Like you're still going to be driven to eat and to drink and, all these, sort of physical things. And it's sort of like a snowball effect of the logical thought process of nihilism. Like the logical side of it is that you can't do, like, there's no point in doing anything. So why do anything? But the fact is you still have to do things in the world. Like it's pretty much physically impossible just to lie in your bed. Well, and
this is where I see, maybe this is helping me understand even more. So when I think someone who's a nihilist, in The Two Who Survived, that and another book as well, I've read twice, where the people in the camps, like in Auschwitz, when they would completely give up on life, basically, they would just lay on their beds, just wait until they got dragged out, in the morning calls when they're supposed to line up, ready to go and do their tasks or go and do whatever. They just lay on their bed, wait for people to drag them out. They wouldn't care if they got killed, didn't eat or whatever. Just didn't care.
Yeah.
That to me is, okay, you're a nihilist.
That's it.
You've achieved it. Like, you don't care absolutely about anything. Do you at that point find no meaning in life? You might not, though. Like, you might start finding meaning in life. Like, you want to live for a purpose, for something, but you might not care about it anymore. Is there a difference between there? Is there a difference between caring and still having meaning?
I don't think so, man.
Yeah, and if there isn't, that's what I would see as a nihilist. You just pretty much like, oh, yep, I'm ready to die. Like, what's the point of me doing anything else?
Yeah, I can't separate those two.
Yeah.
If you're sitting on a bed waiting to die, I don't think you care about anything or you find meaning in anything.
Yeah.
You're just there.
And that's where I go. So that's where it might be hard to find a nihilist, because they're in bed, not doing anything.
Exactly, and you're not going to really hear from them. You'll hear
apart from the YouTube comments.
Yeah. Okay. Last one. Some bit of pop culture. Where can you find nihilism if you're interested in this?
Yeah, I want to hear this. Yes.
So Fight Club's a pretty good movie / book for it. Watch the movie. The book's not as good as the movie. I think that's good. A taste of it, where it's they're going down that path. The Tyler Durden and whatnot of finding no meaning, and then I guess like creating their own sort of meaning.
But see, that's not nihilism. That's existentialism.
Yeah, it's. I think it's more of
because that's what confused me, because existentialism is the no meaning, but then finding your own meaning. That is existentialism. Yeah, and that's why a lot of people, when I was reading about Nietzsche, they were saying, well, a lot of people think that he was a nihilist, and he was an existentialist, because he understood that there was no meaning, but then sought out to find meaning in that world.
Okay, well, actually, in Fight Club, I'm just thinking now, I don't think he really says you can find meaning from anything.
Yeah,
like they're more just on the destructive path.
Yep.
Of there's no meaning, so I'm just going to fuck everything up.
Yeah, okay.
That's sort of...
And that to me, that would be like, that'd be like nihilism.
So the Joker in Batman, there's some men who just want to watch the world burn. That sort of... I think that gets at it as well, that destructiveness for no apparent cause. So the Columbine killers as well, they were sort of... I'd say they got into that state where it was like, fuck it, I'm just going to...
do whatever.
Do whatever, and that doing whatever is, adding pain onto everyone else. That sort of, we haven't really talked about that aspect of it, and getting into that mind state of wanting to hurt other people because. The Life of Brian, it's a pretty good one. It's
the Life of Brian, okay.
The Monty Python's, where it's sort of getting there. Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh, if your kids want to know. And the last one is good old Saitama.
Yeah, One Punch Man. Yeah.
So, those are the last ones, I think. So
good. Okay.
We'll leave it at that.
We'll leave it at that. I'm awaiting. I'm going to prepare myself for some commentary on this one. Hopefully, we'll see. Prove me wrong for sure. That's been nihilism, however you want to pronounce it, say it.
So if people want to find meaning in life, if they're feeling nihilistic, Juan, where can they find?
Yeah, if you find nihilistic, look. First of all, I'm sorry for your loss of meaning, but regather it right back by checking out the Mere Mortals podcast. That's where you're going to find it. Go and see all of our videos, all of our podcasts, all of the audios, all of the good content. You want to see thumbnails? Go to Instagram. You want to see the full videos? Go to YouTube. You want to listen in? Apple, Spotify, Deezer, Stitcher. Man, we're all over the place. Mere Mortals. We are all out there. And look, we are not nihilists by nature. So get motivated. Get doing. That's it. One out.
Karen out. Oh.